From time to time, your sanitary valve requires routine maintenance to ensure peak operating efficiency. This video will teach you the standard service procedures of the SPX APV Delta DE3 Double Seat Mix-Proof Valve. Servicing the DE3 Mix-Proof Valve will require the tools displayed here. It is important to note the use of APV food-grade grease in the maintenance procedure to ensure proper operation of the valve and its internal components. Use of other brands or types of grease may cause damage to internal components, resulting in a malfunctioning valve. Please refer to the operation manual for additional details on where and how to apply grease throughout the maintenance process. Prior to removal of the valve from the process line, control top should be removed from the valve and set aside during the maintenance procedure. Start by marking the lower proximity cable so that it can be easily identified when the valve is returned to service. Once the lower cable is marked, the proximity switches can be removed from the mounting block by loosening the collars. Next, loosen the two clamp hex bolts with a 4 mm hex wrench at the base of the control top. Once loose, lift the control top off and set aside for safekeeping until the maintenance procedure is complete. Before attempting removal of the valve insert from the process line, verify that pumps are locked out and tagged out and that all pressure has been removed from the process line. 2 retaining bolts and 1 jacking bolt will be required to safely remove the valve insert from the process line. With the 13 mm box end wrench, remove 2 of the flange bolts on opposite sides of the flange. In the same locations, insert the 2 longer retaining bolts until the thread is flush with the flange bottom. Note that the retaining bolts should not be threaded in all the way. Once the retaining bolts are in place, the other 2 flange bolts can be safely removed. Insert the jacking bolt into the threaded jacking bore and turn with a 13 mm box end wrench until the valve insert is elevated from the flange slightly and the seal has been broken. It is now safe to remove the retaining bolts and lift the valve insert from the valve body. After the valve insert is removed from the valve body, the lower shaft seal should be removed. To remove the lower shaft seal, expose the sharp pick end of the lower shaft seal tool by turning the black protective housing counterclockwise. Accessing from the top of the body, the pick should pierce the middle of the lower shaft seal and pull from its machined groove in the body. Care should be taken not to scratch or make contact with the metal surfaces in the valve body. Once the seal has been partially removed, lower the protective black cover back over the pick and tighten into position. Use the protective cover to pull the lower elastomer shaft seal and PTFE seal out of the body. With the valve insert removed from the body, the valve can now be taken to a workstation to complete the maintenance procedures. With a 24 mm box end wrench, remove the stop sleeve, exposing the lock washer and stop nut that is located on top of the main actuator cylinder. With 2 17 mm box end wrenches, remove the self-locking nut located below the lower shaft. Slide the lower shaft off of the guide rod and remove the guide rod through the top of the actuator. Continue with the removal of the safety nut and disc spacer. Lift the actuator assembly off of the upper shaft. Using a pick, remove the elastomeric lower seat seal, taking care not to scratch the lower shaft. Once the seat is partially removed from the groove, the remainder of the seat can be pulled out by hand. Next, remove the smaller O-ring from the internal groove in the lower shaft. After ensuring that the lower shaft seal grooves are clean and free of debris, apply a thin layer of approved lubricant to the new seat seal and O-ring prior to installation. Start by installing the new O-ring into the internal groove of the lower shaft. Next, install the seat seal by guiding it into the groove all the way around the lower shaft without twisting the seal. With the aid of a tool, insert 4 sections of the seat seal into the groove. Continue inserting the remaining 4 sections into the groove. right along the bottom and top of the seat seal with the tool to release any air behind the seat seal. Roll the shaft between your fingers to ensure the seat seal has been installed evenly around the shaft. A flathead screwdriver with the sharp edges rounded works well for this task. Whatever tool is used, it is important that there are no sharp edges that could cut the seal or scratch the shaft. To replace the shaft seat seal, start by removing both parts of the upper shaft seal from the balancer. Next, with the use of a pick, remove the upper shaft seat seals, taking care not to scratch the upper shaft. Next, remove the quad ring and support rings located in the middle of the upper shaft. After ensuring that the upper shaft seat seal grooves are clean and free of debris, apply a thin layer of approved lubricant to the new seat seals. Place the upper shaft into a bench vise as shown that is fitted with a brass or aluminum cover over the jaws to protect the finish of the valve components. Install the new seat seal by guiding it into the groove all the way around the upper shaft without twisting the seal. With the aid of a tool, insert 4 sections of the seat seal into the groove. Continue inserting the remaining sections into the groove. Right along the bottom and top of the seat seal with the tool to release any air behind the seat seal. Repeat the procedure on both seat seals and ensure they have been installed evenly around the shaft. Next, install the first split guide ring by compressing the ring and inserting it into the top groove inside shaft. Apply a thin layer of lubricant onto the quad ring and install it into the middle groove found inside the upper shaft. Finally, install the second split guide ring into the bottom groove inside the shaft. A tool, such as a pick or a small screwdriver, can be used to help assist in placement of the guide rings or quad ring into final position. Begin the maintenance of the shaft bearing by removing the jacking screw with a 13 mm box end wrench. The shaft bearing should now be free to remove from the spring actuator. Next, remove the quad ring and O-ring with a pick, as shown. After applying a thin layer of recommended lubricant to both the quad ring and O-ring, install the seals as shown. The shaft bearing is now ready to install back into the actuator. Check the orientation markings on the spring actuator housing. Position the components together. And install the jacking bolt until there are a few threads exposed from the shaft bearing. Apply a thin layer of the recommended lubricant to the upper shaft elastomeric seal and install on the PTFE carrier portion of the seal. Slide the assembled seal with the elastomeric seal toward the plug and position on the upper shaft balancer as shown. Install the upper shaft back into the actuator assembly, ensuring that the upper shaft seal remains in place. Install the lock washer and stop nut and tighten with a 24 mm box end wrench to 40 Nm. Install the guide rod through the top of the actuator until a hard stop is felt. Next, apply lubricant to the exposed lower guide rod and install the lower shaft onto the guide rod. Turning of the lower shaft will help in finding its final position so that the safety nut can be installed into the guide rod threads and torqued to 40 Nm. Next, install the protective stop screw cover onto the main actuator cylinder. Note that prior to tightening the stop screw, there is no gap between the lower shaft and upper shaft. Tighten to 20 Nm. As the stop screw is tightened into position, an atmospheric gap will open. Check that the gap is even over the entire circumference. An uneven gap indicates a bent guide rod, which should be replaced. If this gap does not appear, ensure that you have all other assembly steps correct before proceeding. Before the valve insert can be installed into service, the lower shaft seal must be installed back into the body. Like the upper shaft seal, this is a two-piece seal consisting of an elastomeric seal and PTFE carrier. The PTFE carrier will be installed first with the aid of the lower shaft seal tool. Install the larger diameter to the bottom of the body and use the housing of the tool to ensure correct positioning of the seat all the way around. Apply a thin layer of lubricant on the elastomeric portion of the shaft seal and maneuver the seal into position as was done with the PTFE carrier. Note that the widest part of the seal will face toward the bottom of the body. Once in position, use the housing of the tool to push the elastomeric seal into the groove and work all the way around until the entire seal is flush with the PTFE carrier portion of the seal. The valve insert is now ready to be installed back into the process pipeline. The jacking screw should initially be kept in place. Note the orientation of the valve insert and carefully lower it into the body. Once the valve is in the correct position, all 4 flange bolts can be installed finger tight. Next, remove the jacking bolt before tightening the flange bolts with a 13 mm box end wrench. Based on production schedules, it may be beneficial to stock a spare insert with newly installed seals to expedite changeovers and minimize downtime. After installing the control top adapter onto the main actuator cylinder, set the loose clamp around the adapter until the control top is in place. Set the control top back in place, being sure to align the position guides. Gently push the top down until the control base and adapter come together. Next, position and tighten the clamp to secure the top in place. Connect the air lines to the control top. Next, install the proximity sensors into the mounting blocks by first removing the collar and lock ring. Position the locking collar over the proximity sensor and then place the lock ring onto the sensor. Repeat the process for both sensors. Ensure the sensor cables are installed in the correct location based on your original markings during the removal process. Actuator repair is typically performed only when necessary and outside of the routine valve maintenance already shown in this video. With a 13 mm box end wrench, loosen and remove all 4 hex bolts. Holding the main actuator cylinder in position, lift the assembly off the spring actuator cylinder. Apply pressure to the top of the piston rod to push the piston assembly out of the main actuator cylinder. With a pick, remove the seals in the main actuator cylinder and pistons as shown. Next, apply a thin layer of recommended lubricant to the new elastomeric seals and install, ensuring each is properly seated. Next, insert the piston rod and install the assembly back into the main actuator cylinder. Assist the piston seal to ensure no pinching takes place during installation. Next, install the main actuator cylinder by installing the 4 hex bolts and tightening with a 13 mm box end wrench. Following these procedures will help you properly maintain your DE3 valves to maximize operating life and maintain process integrity. To order replacement seal kits or tools, contact your authorized SPX Flow sales representative or visit www.spxflow.com/APV for more information.